you guys. That's me surfing on a wave. Can you all see this? All right, well, Nate told you a little bit about me. I'm Shelby. First of all, thank you guys for coming. Thank you for telling them to be nice to me. How many people here are from North County? You! All right, you guys left the island. You came all the way down from Canada. I so appreciate it. I know it's a hike from North County. So ever since I was a little kid, I'm going to switch my hand. Ever since I was a little kid, I've been fascinated by adventurers. Those who took the road less traveled, bucked the norm, and turned their wildest ideas into a reality. For the last 20 years, I've been interviewing high achievers in sports, business, philanthropy, and for the last 3 years, I've been interviewing these people on this podcast I created called Wild Ideas Worth Living. That's an ad. In partnership with REI Co-op. So REI Co-op is the presenting sponsor. And on the show, we talk about starting and ways to have success, tactics, tools. We talk about grit and hustle. We talk about failure because that's inevitable. And we talk about the joy of the journey. All of the people I've interviewed share something in common. It usually starts with this phrase, I wonder if. I'm going to show you guys a few examples so you can visualize what I'm talking about. If you can't see, I'll back up. Okay. Anybody here know who Alex Honnold is? So in this picture, it might be hard to see it, but he's got an awesome, chiseled six-pack. I like chiseled six-pack, sorry. And this rock, also chiseled. This is El Capitan. Has anybody been there? All right, if you haven't been to Yosemite, just after this, go. It's beautiful. It's 3,200 feet of vertical granite. Alex decided that he wanted to free solo El Cap, which for those of you who aren't rock climbers, means he wanted to climb it from the top to the bottom, 3,200 feet without ropes, harnesses, any safety gear, no helmet. He falls, he dies. So he moved to Yosemite, lived in a van, my kind of guy, and he worked his butt off. He trained with ropes, and he kept doing the route over and over until it was less scary to do it without ropes. He deleted his social media account. 6 years later, he started climbing. This is Alex at the top of El Cap, looking down 3,200 vertical feet. Here he is again. Thank you, National Geographic, for the photo. At the top, a movie was created about this called Free Solo. Won an Oscar, all because it started with Alex wondering if he could climb to the top of El Capitan. This is surfer Bethany Hamilton. Who here's a surfer? All right, usually surfers go, you. When there's a big wave, it's you. Okay, so Bethany is a remarkable woman. When she was 13, she lost her left arm, to a tiger shark when she was surfing at a place called Tunnels in Kauai. But just a few weeks later, Bethany wondered if she could keep surfing even with one arm. Then she wondered if she could keep competing even with one arm. Then, when she finally had a family, here she is married with her adorable son Tobias and her husband Adam, she wondered if she can compete against the top girls on the surf tour, the WSL. And she did, and she beat the 2-time and the 6-time world champ at the time. And then, while she was breastfeeding her kid, she wondered if she could surf a place called Jaws. For those who surf, Jaws is a really scary wave in Maui. I would never surf there, even if you maybe you'd pay me a lot of money, but I probably wouldn't do it. I couldn't do it. So I was actually invited to be the journalist on the trip. I know you can't totally tell, but that's Bethany and her husband. And, I hung out with Bethany, and she's such a positive person to hang out with. A couple minutes into the boat ride, when we're going out to this break called Jaws, all of a sudden we get there, and she turns to me, and I'm the only girl on the boat, and she said, hey, Shelby, can you help me put my hair into a ponytail? And I was like, yeah, I forgot. Hanging out with her, you don't realize she has only one arm. She can do everything anybody could do with 2 arms. 15 minutes later, after I helped put her hair into a ponytail, she dropped into this. You! All right, you guys are getting it. All right, Bethany Hamilton is like right here. This wave goes to there. I don't know how big it is, but it's big. I would never want to surf that wave. All because she wondered if. So a movie's being made about not just this scene, and you can hear me go, you go Bethany, but it's called Unstoppable. It comes out theaters July 12th. My podcast with Bethany and the producer of this movie, or the director, comes out the same day. That's also an ad. All right, this is Samin Nasrat, who went to La Jolla High School. Go Vikings! All right. I have a few friends who came. So she actually, does anybody know who Samin Nasrat is? All right, a couple foodie fans. So Samin ran cross country at La Jolla High School, but then she wondered if she could turn her real loves, which were not running, but her love of cooking food and especially teaching others to eat, to cook, not to eat. Teaching others to cook, and also her love of writing into a career. So she was at UC Berkeley, and she had dinner at this place called Chez Panisse in San Francisco, or it's like up there, and she fell in love with fine dining. She was like, I'm gonna learn how to cook food, so she got a job there, and she moved to Italy. I'm probably butchering her story a little bit, but she somehow met Michael Pollan, the food writer, taught him how to cook, started teaching other people to cook, wrote a book called Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat, which turned into this badass Netflix series that you guys should watch if you haven't seen it. And the other day, I saw Samin as Time 100's most influential people of the year, a La Jolla Viking, because she wondered if she could turn her love of cooking and teaching others to cook and writing into a career. So over the years, I've wondered a few things. I wondered if, after college, I could get a job as an action sports journalist. I hit up this guy, I was really young, and I hit up the editor-in-chief of the LA Times, and I said, this was 2001, that's how old I am. I was like, hey, can I be an action sports journalist? I think the time is right, and he's like, no. There's never gonna be a position like that, but you should check out the PR guys who cover Vans. And I ended up meeting the PR people who did Vans, made friends, and I became the first female journalist for this thing called the Vans Warped Tour. You guys like punk rock, all right. 60 days on a tour bus for 60 days with 108 bands, writing 2 stories a day, sending it over a dial-up internet connection. 2 minutes a story, 2 minutes a photo, 100 photos a day. It was the adventure of a lifetime. Then it ruined me because I never wanted to have a real job after that, and I wondered, but I did. I wondered if I could. I wondered if I could work in-house at Vans doing marketing and sales, which I did for 5 years. It was an incredible experience. Vans is one of the coolest companies in the world. But then I wondered if, in 2009, even though it was the height of the recession, if I could quit that job to become an adventure journalist again. So if you guys get the Beach and Bay Press or those like newspapers that you probably throw in the trash at your house, I used to write for those when I was 19, and I had an adventure column, and I wanted to go back to telling stories about adventurers. The day I gave notice to my boss, he was like, you're crazy, but okay. The day I gave notice, I literally got an email that said, hey, Shelby, we need a journalist to help cover a group of guys surfing these big waves in Indonesia on paddleboards. And I was like, holy cow, this is awesome. And I said, yes, of course, I'll be there. And these were the waves. You can't tell, but they're good waves. So yeah, it's a good wave. So 5 days sitting on the boat, interviewing these guys, watching them stand up paddle into these crazy waves, getting sunburned and seasick. And I was like, I wonder if I could also surf those waves. Specifically, I wondered if I could get barreled, which is when the wave kind of goes over your head. And then you want to have good style, but I'm still working on my style. Big smile. So it was really fun. Then I wondered if I could compete with boys and write for the men's magazines and be an adventure journalist. And I tucked myself into a trip where I stand-up paddled a portion of the Amazon River. You can't totally tell, but these are birds overhead. And paddling the Amazon was awful. It was so scary. A caiman or basically an alligator chased our crocodile out of the water. And these birds overhead, they're actually called macaws. They're like wild parrots. So there was this moment of magic. Then I wondered if I could become a surf instructor at Surf Diva in Costa Rica and teach women to surf while working for Nike and reporting on the business of the action sports industry from Costa Rica. Then I wondered if I could move to New Zealand, this is me in New Zealand, with a guy I'd met surfing in Costa Rica after knowing him for 3 months. It all sounds pretty sweet, right? Well, it hasn't all been peaches and ice cream. So unfortunately, you can't totally tell, but I've got blood and stitches in most of these pictures. I didn't have stitches my whole life. I was a competitive soccer player through college, and choosing this path, I ended up with more stitches. I've had depression, I've had anxiety, I've vitiligo, which is where my skin has turned white. So it hasn't all been peaches and ice cream, but I've really enjoyed the ride, even though it hasn't been easy. 3 years ago, I wondered if I could help other people live out their wild ideas. I had so many friends who would ask me, like, if I could help them go on an adventure, or a lot of them wanted to quit their job. And I became this like counselor for people wanting to live their wild ideas. I also love talking to people about their wild ideas, and I can't stop asking questions. I've been like this since I was a kid. And so I wondered if I could start this podcast and just talk about how people got their wildest idea. It's what led me to start this podcast, and it's really what led me to you all here today. So I bet you all sitting here have an I wonder if, a wild idea. And if you don't, I want you to think about it. Maybe you have one, maybe you have another one, maybe you have a couple, but I'm sure it's something that scares you a little. Maybe you're afraid of rejection or failure. I've definitely faced that my whole life. So for the next 10 minutes, I'm going to talk about tools and tactics that I've used and that the top adventurers I've interviewed have used to turn their wonder into action. So I know having a why is talked about a lot, but having a why is your reason. It's your reason for doing something scary, and it'll shush not only the naysayers outside, but it'll shush the naysayers that are often in your own head. And I'm guessing you guys are creatives. You take your work really seriously. There might be some self-doubt. When I wanted to quit that corporate job, I had depression, and it was really scary. And I wanted to tell stories of adventures like I had when I was 19. When I started the podcast, I took this Strength Finder test. And I really loved podcasting. There was this guy I listened to, and he was awesome, but he talked about tech, and I was like, I wish he was just a girl, and he talked about adventure. And I was like, that's me. I can do it, but I didn't know a thing about podcasts. So a why not only shushes the naysayers, but if you're like me, I can be a little ADD, a little unfocused. A why keeps you in the game. I know some of you guys have had a crush. You'll do anything for that crush. So like when you have a why is a really good reason to keep you in the game. Okay, so I make okay decisions. I'm like a big fan of like getting a legal pad of paper and writing a pro-con list. Excel spreadsheets are great, but I'm a much bigger fan of making my decisions when I'm outside in nature. The decision to start the podcast, it came when I was hiking in the Central Coast of California. The decision to quit my corporate job, it only came to me after I dropped into this really scary wave in Laguna Beach called rock pile, where you have to like take off between two rocks, and it's not that hard, but I was terrified of it. And that morning, I did it, I dropped in, and I walked into my boss's office that afternoon and was finally able to give notice. I interviewed this woman named Florence Williams on my podcast. She's the author of a book called The Nature Fix. I'd highly recommend it. And in the book, she interviews people and proves scientifically that being in nature makes you healthier, happier, more productive, and you're gonna make better decisions. So we live in the best spot to get outside. You can put your toes in the sand, you can jump in the Pacific Ocean, Wim Hof style, like no wetsuit. And you could go climb Potato Chip Rock, Mission Hills. I highly recommend getting outside. There's gonna be, once you live wildly, you're gonna have to make a lot of decisions. And I tend to make my best decisions from the heart when I'm in nature. Not near my cell phone, by the way. So no cell phones either. My parents were professors. I'm a big fan of education. They taught at San Diego State. Go Aztecs. You! But I'm a much bigger fan of like not effing around. And I think what's great is you can get educated really fast. For those of you who are here because you want to start a podcast, Tim Ferriss has a great blog on everything you need to know to start a podcast. There's a site called Entrepreneur on Fire. He even has templates on what to send to guests to get them on your show and how to get sponsors. When I started the podcast, I had journalism experience and marketing experience. I'd interviewed CEOs of like all these outdoor adventure companies, but I'd never run a business myself, and I did not know how to use this like recorder thing to record a podcast. I could barely hold a microphone. Still struggle, but you know, what I did was I took an accelerator course, and there's so many of these in San Diego right now. I took one through Hera Lab. Day one, all right, we got some Hera Lab people, you. So day one, I wrote my business plan, which was week 1. Day 12, I had to present my business and product to a team of investors. So I had 12 weeks to get this done. Basically, having a roadmap with deadlines kept me in the game, and it kept me, I can be ADD, it kept me really focused. And because I needed to have a product out, and in podcast world, that meant I needed 3 shows out. I don't know why 3 is a magic number, but in podcast world, you want to have 3 shows on Apple Podcasts or iTunes when you launch. So I had a lot of work to do. So one thing about having a roadmap with deadlines is, and having to go fast, is if you're anything like me, I got hung up on things like logo, website, design, and I'm sure you guys are like, I'm a logo designer. Come see me after. I paid all this money, got all hung up on it, only to have REI change it literally the day we signed the contract. So having a roadmap with tight deadlines allows you to not second-guess yourself. And because there's nothing I hate more than losing money, I like to spend money on surfboards and surf trips. Not really shoes, but some people like to spend them on shoes. But because I had to spend money on myself to be there, I showed up. And then because I had to get a product out, I hired an editor, and I paid that editor. Because I was paying them, I really showed up to do the work. So get educated fast, have a roadmap with deadlines, invest in yourself. Okay, so when you have a wild idea, you're probably going to have to pitch it to someone. Maybe it's your mom. Maybe it's your spouse. Maybe it's an investor. I think pitching is a really good skill to have, and I had to learn it to be a freelance journalist. Pitching is like dating. You want to put your best foot forward. You don't want to be a total stalker. People were like, oh, shoot. And you want to make it mutually beneficial. So when I started this podcast, I met a guy at Seaside Market who happened to be VP of Marketing or VP of Sales at Prana. I told him my idea, and he's like, oh, I just had lunch with the head of REI. They're launching this campaign called Force of Nature, where they're celebrating women who get outdoors and are courageous. I was like, oh, that's me. I was so pumped. So remember when Chris Soriano talked? He talked about how to get that number. I figured out the number for the guy to contact at REI. I did a little stalking. And do your research. I found this guy, and I called him, and I said, hey, I'm Shelby. I know you're doing this awesome campaign called Force of Nature. I'd love to be part of it. I have this podcast. I think that would be a perfect fit. He was like, Shelby, you sound enthusiastic and great, but we have nothing to do with podcasts right now. And I was like, oh, man, okay. Head between the legs. I went ahead and pitched other brands. I got Surf Diva and Newzest and just a ton of really cool brands that sponsored the podcast that first year. And then I wanted to see if I could actually do something with it. And it did grow. People actually listened. So 6 months into starting the podcast, I created a pitch deck for the next year. And I spent a lot of time and a little bit of money into it. And I really cared about what I was pitching for the next year. And then I remembered, oh, that guy from REI. Shot him an email, and I said, hey, do you want me to send your pitch deck, my pitch deck for 2018? And he was like, actually, he emailed me back right away. He'd been so hard to get a hold of. And he said, let's jump on a call today, 10 minutes. I was like, yeah, we're on. And I had practiced so much for my pitch deck that I was able to pitch him really well. We signed a really good partnership, and it's been a great relationship with REI. So if you ever need camping gear or you want to take a trip, go support REI. They teach classes on how to rock climb and all sorts of great stuff. But just know that originally he said no, and a no is often not now. I'm still a freelance journalist. That very first story I sold to Outside Magazine, it's maybe like this big in Outside Magazine, 20 pitches until they took the 21st. Finally on the 21st, I was like, here's this guy, he did this, and I was like really straightforward, and they liked it. I still get rejected. I still get rejected by Outside Magazine. I've written for them since 2009, and sometimes they just send me story ideas. So just know that sometimes a no is not now, and circle back. Don't be a stalker, but a little bit. Okay, this is the most common, most important piece of advice every single adventurer I've interviewed has given me. Sailors say it best. You can spend all this time on your boat, fixing it up, getting it ready, but eventually You just have to untie your dock lines and go. You're never going to be ready. I love this picture. It's an illustration by artist Lisa Congdon, who's on an upcoming episode. She didn't start practicing art until she was in her 30s, and now she's like one of the best illustrators. And it just, oh, this is a wave, by the way. They're just cartoon waves. So begin anyhow. You're never going to be ready. You just have to start. So if you guys are scared, you're going to be scared. I was nervous as heck, like till just now, standing up here. But I started talking, and it helped. So begin anyhow. All right. This one's pretty near and dear to my heart. Who here has ever been afraid of failure or is a perfectionist? Raise your hand. Okay, the rest of you are lying. You guys are creatives. You take your work seriously. You care what other people think, I imagine. The biggest thing that holds people back from pursuing their wonder if and turning it into action or pursuing their wild idea is fear of failure and perfectionism. Does anybody get that? It's spelled wrong? Okay. Not perfect. This is something I still work on every day. I'm glad you guys got that. I worked hard on that. They're like, you have a spelling error. And I was like, oh, good. So here's a couple of ways I've dealt with fear of failure and perfectionism. One, just let that shit go. Two is have a sense of humor. If you can learn to laugh at yourself, just getting dressed this morning was hysterical for me. But having a sense of humor is big time. Gratitude. I know it's like a little like Oprah-y, Brene Brown-y, but having gratitude puts you into a place of positivity. And when you send love and gratitude to something, like I'm sending so much love and gratitude to all of you guys, it's a game changer. Now you like me. And you're nice. Okay, comparison. I loved Danny Kim's, Danny actually Kim came on my podcast, but when he spoke here, we talked a little bit about social media and comparison. We do it on Instagram. We look at other people and what they're doing, but we have no idea if you're comparing your chapter 1 to someone's chapter 20. Comparison is the biggest thief of joy, and I'm guilty of it, but just try not to do it. Kindness. This is a tiger saying, be gentle with yourself, also from Lisa Congdon, upcoming on Wild Ideas Worth Living in August. So when you're kind to yourself, when you're kind to others, like I'm kind to you, you're being kind to me, but you have to be kind to yourself. I imagine you can be hard on yourself if you're anything like me, if you're a creative. So be really, really gentle with yourself. Also, worry. Who here worries about the future? I do, and I get anxiety about it. And honestly, worrying gives you something to do, but it doesn't get you anywhere. So instead of worrying, what if instead of worrying about something that we just don't even know the outcome, what if we could turn our worry into wonder? What if we could evoke that childlike curiosity and get full of courage and positivity? What if instead of worrying, what if we failed? What if we succeeded? Thank you guys so much. I really believe, I'm almost done. I know we thought we were done, but hold on. I really believe a little adventure is life's antidote. I hope you guys all tell a stranger in the room your wonder if and turn it into action. Talk about your wild idea. And once you go, I hope you go all in. Thank you guys so much. Now I'm really done.